Dear students, myself, Dr. R.K. Randhawa, welcome you to the new start, to the new beginning, to the new semester, that is ninth semester. So we will be studying land and real estate laws. Let me share my presentation for you. The land and real estate laws. Unit 1 deals with the land reform. And the first topic for this unit is land reforms in India. It would be more of an introductory lecture of the land laws. So the suggested readings of this subject, you can take reference from the textbooks written by M.L. Upadhyay. The title of the book is Law, Poverty and Development. Secondly, you can also refer to Dr. Kamal D.P. Singh's Land Laws. And for the purpose of reference, you can refer S.N. Shukla, the Constitutional Law. You can also refer to any constitutional law book you must be having with you. And this will be helpful for the purpose of understanding the agrarian reforms uh, uh, which happened during the time period of First Amendment to 44th Amendment. So this was the period when all the agrarian reforms happened in India after the independence. So this is your syllabus. If we have the look on this your syllabus, in the first unit, as I told you already that we will be dealing with the land reforms in India and agrarian relations in pre-independent India, and afterwards, after the independence, constitutional provisions and all the amendments dealing with the agrarian reforms. We are not going to study all the each and every amendment. We will be studying only the amendments which were related to the agrarian reforms. In the unit 2, you can see the urban development and regulations. And for this purpose, firstly, we need to understand what the urbanization is, what are the issues related to the urbanization, and what are the various perspectives related to urbanization. And going forward, we will be studying Land Acquisition Act 2013, which deals with the acquisition provision that's your property can be acquired by the state for the purpose of any public purpose, but it need to give government needs to give you some compensation. So all the provisions relating to that, the acquisition of land and in lieu of compensation, these are given under the Land Acquisition Act. And there are various institutions, urban development institutions, working in area of NCR. Actually, land is a subject of state list. So every state has its own provisions relating to land, and but we, as your curriculum suggests, that we need to stick to NCR. So all the NCR, the institutions, urban development institutions, which are working in area of NCR, that is Haryana. For Haryana, we have Huda working as urban development institution, and in the area of Noida, that is Gautam Budh Nagar. So Noida, the full form of Noida, it is not Noida. Actually, Noida is the New Okhla Industrial Development Authority. The name of this place is Gautam Budh Nagar. And in same way, Delhi, of course, Delhi Development Authority. So these are the institutions which work for the purpose of development in urban areas. And in going further, Unit 3, You can see real estate development and apartment ownership. So real estate, yes, real estate is a stream, is an area that which have grown by leaps and bounds, and it has played a very important role in Indian economy also. So, and you all know that land is such that it is not increasing, it is decreasing. So we don't have much land in the urban area to but to have a livelihood, to have a space to live, we need some land. So for that purpose, the culture of in the area of NCR, we have developed a culture of apartments rather than having an individual house. So how to regulate the provisions, issues which can be which can erupt because of any issue of ownership issue. It can be of ownership issue. It can be of any kind of issue between the neighbors or the flat owners in the same tower or same building. So these are the issues which are dealt with in Delhi Apartment Ownership Act, which we are going to study. And going forward, we have Unit 4, that is Delhi Rent Control Act. So in Delhi Rent Control Act, deals with the huge amount of the cases which deal with the rent laws. So if you practice, if you have experience in the area of civil side, you will have a chance to experience rent matters. So all the rent matters are dealt with under Delhi Rent Control Act, which is a good area of practicing. So if you are going for practicing in civil side, you are surely going to be well versed with this act to excel in this stream. Going forward, if we look at the importance of this subject, why do we study land laws in ninth semester? So if you look at the main objective is of this paper is to focus on the land reforms in India, all the constitutional provisions related to land reforms, unless and until you would not be able to know what were the problems of land and what reforms have been held through these constitutional provisions. So you would not be able to understand what exactly the present legislations which are relating to land, uh, the purpose of those legislations, and Land Acquisition, Rehabilitation, Resettlement Act, Urban Real Estate Development Laws, Provisions of Rent Laws. So all these legislations are mainly dealing with the land. This is the main objective, to understand what the issues, what the reforms have been done through these legislations. And it would be helpful for you to trace back the history of agrarian relations in pre-independent India and the post-independent India. That is before independence and after independence, for the better understanding of present position of laws which are relating to land. So the introduction of this subject, as we can say that land is considered as an important element of life, and this is highly valued in most of the world because land is useful to man in many ways. It is source of your food. When you cultivate the land, you grow your food. So 70% of the population of India, they reside in the rural areas. So they grow their food, they cultivate their land, which becomes their livelihood, source of livelihood, source of income. So and the every person needs a place to live. For that reason, again, we need a place where you need a place to live. You need some land. So as already suggested, that 70% of population resides in rural area, and most of them have the main source of income coming from agricultural land, agricultural activities. And landlessness, that means the persons who don't have any piece of land, or they don't have any piece of land in their names in um, records, registers of the government. The main cause of this landlessness is the rural poverty. Why the rural people are poor? Because they don't have land. As they don't have land, they cannot grow the crops, and they cannot sell the crops. They don't have any other source of income. Although there are three vocations suggested by Kautilya, that one is the agriculture, uh, second one is the cattle rearing, and the third one is the business trade. Any kind of business or trade a person uh, can have for the purpose of earning a livelihood. And this insecurity of food and vulnerability to exploitation, uh, hence landlessness brings various obstacles in routine functioning of the agrarian system. Agrarian system here means the system of agricultural land. How do we regulate the rights of agrarian reforms, or agrarian rights or title in the land? So these are the various types of system which this various types of agrarian rights, agrarian culture, economic, and every kind of this thing comes under the agrarian system. And in the absence of any legal title, uh, that means if the person he doesn't have any kind of land in his own name, it will be difficult for him to obtain any insurance for his crop, any loan from banks. And there are so many schemes coming up every day for farmers. So, and that's why they are not, because they are not having any title in land. They don't have any legal right in land. So they remain aloof for having any kind of benefits of the government schemes. The main solution, what would be the solution, if you think to these such problems? So solution to this problem lies in effective land reform legislation. If we have effective land reform legislation and an effective implementation of the same, then this landlessness can be eradicated, and people can have land, and they can have some source of livelihood. They can have some sense of security. They can have sense of some uh, you can say social security, or financial security. So if a person would be having some financial security, then this person would can avail all the benefits from the government scheme, and he can also apply for loans, bank loans, and he will be getting that those loans. And this way, the rural poverty can be eradicated. So when I'm saying land reforms, so many times I have used the word land reform. So what is the land reform? So what kind of reforms am I talking about? So these reforms are mainly abolition of zamindari system. It is consolidation of holdings, and it is sealing legislation. So all these kind of reforms are relating to land, are the reforms, because there were problems, and these were the solutions to those problems. So what were those problems? We'll be studying in this chapter only, this under this unit only. So mainly land is not a commodity. As we know, it is not a commodity and it cannot be treated as such in a welfare state like India, because the increased agricultural productivity and this improves food security, which is very much required, which is very much important for a welfare country like India. So these reforms deals with the redistribution of land from those who have excess of land. That means I'm talking about the landlords, those who have the land, to those who have none. That means who are landless. So this kind of reform we are talking about, meaning by that there should be equality. At least we can try to have some kind of equality between the rich and the poor. So this redistribution of land, from taking land from those who have the access to it, that is the landlords, and giving it to those who have no land, and those who are landless. So the purpose of doing this redistribution is to increase the bargaining power of the rural poor, so that he can also have a social security. He can also have some kind of financial security. So this redistributive policy, what they are seek to do. So what was the objective of such kind of redistributive policies? Firstly, to secure land rights. How do you secure land rights? You will be recording some land rights in some land records prepared by government, obviously, and protection of ownership rights. The person who is cultivating that land, his ownership must be protected. And who is going to protect that? It's only the government. Government will be going to give protection to those rights by recording the title, recording the names of those persons in the registers of the government. It is called record of register. Then, secondly, redistributive policies seek to ensure redistributive rights. What kind of redistributive rights? Fixing a land ceiling, a limit. Ceiling is here means a limit. Fixing a limit that this one person can have only this much of land in his name, not more than that. And if one person is holding some land in his name more than that limit which is prescribed by the government, then the excess of the land will be taken from him and it can be given to the some landless persons by the government. And redistributing surplus land. Yes, of course, the surplus now, if you are, for example, if you are holding more than prescribed, let's say government has prescribed a ceiling limit of 500 acres. That means you cannot hold a land more than 500 acres. If there is land, you are holding 1,000 acres of land, the 500-acre land you can hold, and the rest of the 500-acre lands will be the surplus land. And if it is surplus, it will be taken back by the government, and government will redistribute it to the people who don't have some land. So it gives us some sense of equality, which is very much enshrined in our constitution under Article 14. The objectives of land, if we talk about the objectives of land reforms, we can see that after independence, government has decided to abolish the system of intermediaries and to remove zamindar, jagirdars between the state and the peasant. So there were so many intermediaries between the state and the peasant. Peasant had the tiller who cultivated the land. This was the first legislation taken by almost all the states, called Abolition of Zamindari System Act in 1950s. So most of the states enacted the laws which for the purpose of abolition of zamindari system. So this zamindari system was very exploitative towards the tiller, because these zamindars, they were intermediaries between the state and the main tiller of the land. And the main objective of the land reforms are to make redistribution of land, as we studied that land, to make a socialistic pattern of society. How can we make a socialistic pattern of society? Because such an effort will reduce the inequalities in ownership of land. Inequalities, again, we are talking about Article 14. There must be equality between the people. So those at one side, there are people who are holding so much so much of land, and there are people who don't have even a single piece of land. And to make this difference, to reduce this kind of difference, the main idea behind or the main objective behind land reform is the redistribution. Plus, to ensure land ceiling and take away the surplus land to be redistributed among small and marginal farmers, and to legitimize tenancy with ceiling limit, tenancy with ceiling limits, that a person cannot hold more land than prescribed by the government. There is the ceiling limit. And to register all the tenancy with the village panchayat, so that there can be a record of rights. So there can be a register which have the record of the entitlements, of the legal titles of the peasants, of the farmers. So these are the main objectives of the land reforms. So talking about the Indian land system, if we see what kind of system was prevalent in India, or what kind of India's land system is, the system includes a system of production in social, technological, economic condition, along with productivity and distribution of income. And land tenure system includes social, technical, economic, agrarian structure. Legal rights of individuals related to land, and also the social relationship amongst the population. Holding the land by an individual, that again means the record of rights, how much land has been held by the any one person, one individual. Then system of land tenure change with times, with changes in economic factors, technological innovations, change in demography, changes in size of population, and of course the political influences. And it's a continuous process, these changes for the purpose of system of land tenure every time. There's so many reasons cited here, which mainly which become the source of change in the system of land tenure. If we talk about the systems again, and we can have a look on here that what kind of systems were prevalent in pre-independent India. One was Ryotwadi, Mahalwadi, Zamindari, and Jagirdari. So these were the various names given to those such kind of systems. So what was the Ryotwadi system? First of all, we need to know about the meaning of Ryot. Who is called Ryot? A Ryot is the peasant, the farmer, who is the real tiller of the land, who is cultivating the land. That is the owner of land. So Ryotwadi system was extended in Madras in the year 1772 and extended to Bombay Presidency afterwards. Under the system, every registered holder of land is considered as the owner of the land, as considered as the proprietor of the land. And he paid revenue directly to the government. So that means there is no intermediary between the state and the farmer. So he paid directly to the government, and he was also having the liberty to sell, to lease out, or to give that property or land to any person. In Mahalwari system, the land ownership is held as joint ownership with the village body. So here the owner is the village body, and the person who is having a tenancy or a right to cultivate that land would be a tenant on that land, right? In Ryotwari system, the real tiller was the real owner, considered to be the real proprietor. But in Mahalwadi, the owner is the village body itself. Next is Zamindari system, and under this system, the whole village was under only one landlord. There was one zamindar under which whole village was working. That means the whole village was cultivating land and paying revenue or share of produce or share of crop to the zamindar. The persons interested can work in the zamindar's land as tenants, laborers based on the agreement with the zamindar, and the zamindari system was known to be more exploitative, as he used to hike the price of the land whenever he wished to do so. Right? The zamindar, whenever he wishes, he could hike the prices of rent, hence exploiting the tiller, right? And the Jagirdari system is almost as similar as Zamindari system. The Jagirdar is empowered to control unproductive masses of the villages by engaging them in the agrarian activity. So there were, at that point of time, there were so many institutions of intermediary tenures which were evolved uh, with the various names. So various names have been given to these intermediaries, and some of them are the names are Zamindar, Jagirdar, Mansabdar. So Zamindar, as we already in the last slide studied, that Zamindar, the village head, collecting land revenue from the ryots, from the farmers. Jagirdar, who was holding service tenure. So these Jagirdars were holding service tenure because they were the officers of the kings, and in lieu of salary, they were granted with some land. So these grants, in lieu of the services, were called Jagirs. So hence the holding of such holder of such Jagirs was called as Jagirdar, and he was enjoying revenue remission in lieu of service rendered. He didn't need to pay the revenue on that particular land because he had rendered his services to the government, king, or emperor, whoever at that point of time was there. And then comes Mansabdars. So these Mansabdars, again, they were granted some piece of land in return of maintaining army for royal head, because for royal also needs some kind of army for the purpose of defense. So these people, these Mansabdars, So these people maintain some kind of people, or we can say some kind of army, for helping the royal help in defeating the enemy. So in lieu of that, in return of that, they get some kind of grants. They were also, so these intermediaries are came up. They came up during this time period of Mughals, time period of mostly in the time period of Mughals, and after that also Britishers in the times of British India. These intermediaries came up with the between the state and the real tiller, and they used to exploit the tiller, taking more money from that, more revenue from that person, more tax from that person, that farmer, and paying less to the emperor. So if you look at this chart, this shows land reforms in India in two phases. Phase one, which is your prior independence, and phase two, after independence. Phase one, the prior independence, what happened prior independence? Again, we can divide this phase into two parts, prior British rule and during British rule. Why not after British rule? After British rule, what happened? Constitution came. After British rule, India got independence. So during British rule, right? Again, further, if you look prior, what was there? What was the system? What was the history prior British rule? Who were there ruling in India? Hindu period and Muslim period. Under Hindu period, we'll study Manu, Kautilya, and then Mauryas, Guptas, and under Muslim period, Alauddin Khilji, Sher Shah Suri, Akbar. So these people did a lot towards agrarian reforms. They started revenue generation, revenue administration. And if then again, when we look at the history during British rule, again we can further divide this into two parts. During East India Company, because East India Company entered India with the sole purpose of business, doing business. But when uh, it saw that India is a very flourishing country, and they started exploiting, they started thinking that they can rule India. And yes, they did this, and during then ultimately when the reign was gone to the crown, during that British regime, what was the land system in India? We will be going to study that system. And in under phase two, after independence, we got our constitution. Under constitution, we will be studying only the amendments which are dealing with the agrarian reforms. So what are those amendments? It is First Amendment, it is Fourth Amendment, 7th, 17th, 24th, 25th, 26th, 29th, and 42nd and 44th Amendment to the Constitution. So these are the particular amendments which are dealing with the land reforms, so agrarian reforms, precisely saying. In the next lecture, we will be studying land reforms in India. We'll study the phase one, that is the prior independence, agrarian structure prior independence. And phase two, after independence, as per this diagram. So thank you very much. Have a good day.